Jason, certificate lifespans are shortening.
Yes, sir.
In the public sphere. I'm talking about public certs real specifically here. But there's a lower limit on how low they can go. And this is one of the things that people don't necessarily think about. So we start talking about, hey, March to 47-day certificates, and then we have a conversation about 10-day certificates. That's a very important time frame because that's the term at which you no longer have revocation checking.
Yes.
Because the belief is that just renewal will solve the problem. And so people start saying to me, okay, we're going to have 1-day certificates or we're going to have 1-hour certificates. And my answer is no. You know why?
Well, I can tell you right now that I consider a 10-day or what Let's Encrypt right now has as a 6-day cert to be a 1-day cert already.
Well, there is that.
Right. Like 47-day cert to me is a 30-day cert.
Yes, there is that there's slot built into everything for sure. Right? 47-day cert is meant to be cycled once a month. It's a monthly cert. A 10-day cert is meant to be cycled once a week. So it's a weekly cert with slot built in. That's why it's a 10-day cert.
Exactly.
But you can't get down to a 1-day cert. And the problem is clock skew.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't think about this, but certs have beginning and ending times. And those times are hard-coded into the cert. And that is interpreted by the clock. So if I were to set up a network and I were to set the date on everything on that network to 2005, and I had an old certificate on a hard disk somewhere from 2005, I could put it on and it would work because it's all based on the local clock.
Yep.
And most people don't think about this, but it turns out that the amount of clock skew that exists in the world is surprisingly high.
Very true.
Right? I remember a story. I'm going to tell you a little story. This is one of Tim's little side stories. Just indulge me. Fast forward if you don't want to indulge me, but it's a good story. So once upon a time, back when we subscribed to cable, and you would have a cable box sitting on top of your television. I lived in this apartment, and I had a cable box, and one of the things the cable box had was it had the time on it. Had a little clock on it. I also had a laptop that I used to plug into an Ethernet port. I'd put it in my docking station. And the network at work would automatically sync the clock of my computer every day to what the network at work had. I could change my computer clock, walk in, plug it in, and it would restore it to the time that the network felt it was. Furthermore, I had this device. It was an alarm clock that supposedly was accurate down to the millionth of the second over once a year or whatever. And every day it would sync up to geosynchronous satellites, and it would make sure it was exactly synced to the atomic clocks. So this was supposedly the atomic clock, the perfect link. And all three of them were different. Mm-hmm. And they were so different that the earliest of them and the least of them, if I caught it at the right time, would literally be more than a minute off. Mm-hmm. So I could sit there and I could see 203, 204, and 205 lined up next to each other. And it drove me insane. And I couldn't change any of them. I couldn't fix the computer because the network at work would fix it back every day. And I couldn't fix the thing that was coming down the cable because that was owned by the cable people and they didn't care what I had to say. And I couldn't fix the other one, which presumably was the most accurate of the three. And I remember at the time, just as a young pup, thinking, come on, how hard can this be? I mean, if they're off by a second or a couple seconds, they don't change it right at the same time. I'm like, all right, I get that. But do we really have to be off by more than a minute? Right? Now, flash forward now to an older Tim, and it's much worse than that. If you go out and you crawl the internet, you hit plenty of clocks that are off by hours, half a day, a day, servers and client systems. And so one of the things that we take away from this is if we start making our public certs. Now, if you're whatever you're doing in your own network, it's up to you, number one. Number two, all the stuff in your network is probably pretty synced up. So you can run in a 1 hour cert. You know, I talk about this all the time, a 1 hour cert or a 5-minute cert. In a network environment, it can work great, right? When things are off by a millionth of a second, you don't really care if you've got a 5-minute cert. Clock skew is not a meaningful issue. But if you're using public certs and you care about connectivity to the broadest possible audience, which again, maybe you don't, right? Maybe I'm using public certs and I've got kind of a limited set of people and I think I know who they are and anyone else can go pound sand. But if you're using public certs and you want to connect broadly to the public, if you're running, a government site or an e-commerce site or anything, large scale consumer facing where broad connectivity matters to you, there is a lower bound. It's probably in the ballpark of 6 days, like you said, beyond which it's not really practical.
That's so
to
true.
Use these certs.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. Hey, I'll drive you right nuts with this one, Tim.
Okay, I'm not nuts enough already. Can you see how that drove me crazy,
no,
though?
It completely.
Oh, I wanted to slap somebody.
Completely.
Okay, go on.
Now, here's something fun. So I have a OpenAI project right now for travel.
Okay.
And so within one folder, I have like all my restaurant and like, how do I get from this gate to this gate, instructions for O'Hare, and like I got a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
And one of the things that as a goof I asked OpenAI to do was to calculate for me on any given flight that I'm taking, specifically flights, how much clock skew is this flight creating?
Because of the relativistic time that you're moving. We didn't even get into that. We didn't even get into relativity.
My point is this. You don't have to be an astronaut to be affected by relativity.
Sure.
You could simply go on a transatlantic flight.
Sure.
And be, 43 nanoseconds older than the people who are on the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
So when two clocks are separated and their gravity is closer to this one than this one, everything changes. And so how do clocks get skewed? Well, yeah, a lot of it is just misconfiguration.
I think the scale we're talking about, it's all misconfiguration.
But I just like throwing that in as
absolutely.
Time is never going to be
physics.
Damn physics.
That damn physics. We got to get around that, right? I think the laws of Australia are
we got to get Australia
are more
on this.
Powerful than the laws of physics.
We got to get Australia
more important than the laws of physics, right?
Australia can solve it.
Anyway, so it's it's fine. Like I think the need to get to a 1-day cert as opposed to a 7-day cert is pretty darn low in the grand scheme of things. And if you think about where just a few years ago we were at 3-day certs and we're pretty soon going to be at 47-day certs, and you can imagine the road from there to 10-day certs or 7-day certs, that's a whole lot of good. And when you start to say, when I take a 1-year cert and I turn it into a 6-month cert, I've removed half the risk surface, right? When I take it from a 6-month cert to a 3-month cert, I've removed half the remaining risk surface. So half as much risk when I take that down. Every time the amount of risk surface I take away goes down. And so the benefits go down.
Yeah.
Right? So you can see within our current paradigms for how we think about computers that we hit a diminishing returns, maybe in the ballpark of a week, where it's not worth the effort to further pare it down. So I don't think settling at a week or 10 days is a problem, or has been identified as a problem. And I think when we get there, maybe we'll revisit this conversation. But right now it's real easy let's get to 47 and then eventually let's get to 10. And then we'll know so much more then than we know now that we'll cross that bridge. But it's worth also being aware that until the clock skew problem is solved, moving beyond that, it's not just a matter of having better, more reliable automation systems. There's other problems that start to come into play, right? And I know you were being funny with the relativity thing, but it's actually not, right? Like one of the things that happened was, Newtonian physics worked well for mapping the planets for a long time.
Not
and then
Mercury.
as we got really precise on our mapping of the planets, it stopped working. It was wrong.
It was flat wrong for Mercury.
Right,
That was
right.
that's what inspired relativity.
Exactly. And therefore relativity, right? And so as we get more closer to that, these things will probably rear their head and will need to be dealt with. My point is, right now we're just trying to get on the Copernican system at all, right?
Right.
And so you do that first.
Exactly.
And then when you get there, then you can deal with the more advanced problem. So I think sometime in the future, when you and I are doing episode 2000, we may be discussing the pragmatic problems of the clock skew issue. I think for now, knowing that we can make it to 10, let's say, without a problem is good enough.
Yep.
And maybe one day not. But either way, if you're out there thinking, I'm going to be automated and I'm going to be updating my certs every day, which I know some people are because it's been said to me. No, I don't think you are. Like, I think you're going to get to about 10. And I think that's what you should have your eyes on right now as a goal. And beyond that is all event horizon. Like, let's worry about it when we know more and the world is different. That's kind of the pragmatic point.
Take your inventory first.
Sure.
And as you say, by episode 2000,
Right. And right now, let's just get to 47, right? But if you're trying to imagine where it's going, think of it going to 10. Don't think of it going to 1.
That's it, Tim.
All right.
Very interesting. But lifespans really are use case dependent.
Yeah.
Private
Totally.
teaches us that.
In the private world, like, you can do so much more.
But I don't consider public to be out of that realm of thinking. Public has its own use case. And therefore, this clock skew problem is very specific, right? It affects everything, but the realm of clock skew in that use case has a width. And therefore, it defines what your minimum can be.
Yeah.
And that's a really good point. This is an interesting case where PKI is PKI, and public or private, it doesn't really matter when you consider that every use case, public simply being another PKI use case, has probably an ideal lifespan.
Yeah.
And it's shorter than where we are now,
Yeah.
but there are limits.
Yeah. I agree.
A private use case, an airplane taking off and landing. You don't want to revoke that before it landed,
Right.
right? So therefore, there's a very natural lifespan to that use case.
Right. Yep.
Public isn't as clear cut, but there is a minimum. That's the point you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And you say that totally could vary from thing to thing. Also, though, you got the opposite, right? Like in the airplane case, you don't want those certs to be too long-lived either, right?
You absolutely don't want them. That's the thing.
Right.
What I'm saying is there is an ideal. There is a too short, and there is a too long.
Yep.
And in the case of an aircraft, the sweet spot in the middle is very well defined.
Exactly. Yeah.
In some others, it's not as well defined, but we are approaching it, I think, with public.
Yes.
We're getting closer.
At least with our current, with some basic paradigmatic stuff that's going to have a hard time changing. We're approaching it. Like before we get below those kinds of times, some important stuff is going to have to be fundamentally different.
Exactly.
And it's not looming.
in fact, Tim, think about this for a moment.
Right.
Not to extend the podcast too much, but maybe this is another podcast coming,
Sure.
which is for ephemeral certificates that last the lifetime of an authentication sequence.
Right.
Okay. For those, maybe, a start date and an end date isn't what's ideal as the policy. What's ideal is, look, I had a birth, and after a certain number of
I'm gonna
seconds,
count this many.
yeah, I'm simply going
milliseconds,
to
and
count.
then
I'm
just
going
gonna-
to count time.
I'm gonna just time it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's not before time plus X.
Yeah, and that origin time cannot be arbitrary based on your local clock.
Right.
It's almost like it needs a receipt of time passing.
Yeah, or an independent timestamp.
Or an independent timestamp,
Yeah, but
which
then that's
would
still-
require a lot of
then
things.
the client's local clock is still a problem there.
But there you go.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
Whole another podcast. All right. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Tim.